Musical Talk, the UK independent musical theatre podcast.
Welcome to this week's episode of Musical Talk. Joining me is a voice from the past who's always enjoyed following her career and her wonderful many voices. Here to talk about her latest project is YouTube sensation Christina Bianco. Hello, Christina. Welcome back to Musical Talk.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for having me.
It's all right.
YouTube sensation. I feel like I haven't really been a YouTube sensation in quite a few years, but I'm grateful for the continuation of the title. Thank you.
Well, for me, it's how it all started, wasn't it? In a way, and
yeah, for most people, yeah, it is. It's just still the weirdest thing to me. I have to say, it's so weird.
And for those of you listening who maybe were born yesterday and don't know who you are, tell us what you do and why you're doing the project you're doing.
Okay. Well, gosh, for me, giving you a short, clear version as an Italian New Yorker is really difficult, but here I go. So I'm Christina, born and raised in New York City.
How you doing?
And I've been singing and acting and doing theater my whole life, but around 2008, I was cast in the long-running show in New York, Forbidden Broadway, which spoofs Broadway and the West End and all the great shows. And in those shows, you tend to do impressions. Then I became known for doing impressions. And then a few years later, some videos were posted on YouTube in which I was doing impressions and in ways you wouldn't expect, like Julie Andrews singing Ariana Grande, something like that. And I had quite a few, I think 3 or 4 videos go viral. And get me not just YouTube, but lots of media attention at the time. And I became known as the girl who did impressions, particularly singing impressions. So it sort of took over for a while, and it in a good way. It opened many doors for me. But luckily, over the years, I've been able to balance being Christina, the singer and actor in her own right, with the girl that does the voices from your screen. And in this new production that I'm a part of, The Rise and Fall of Little Voice, I get to balance both those things. It's a beautiful play in which I get to act and have very dramatic, wonderful, and funny comedic scenes, but also I get to do impressions of great musical divas. How is that for you? Is that me in a nutshell? There you go.
Perfect. I mean, it's almost... I want to say 2 things. I'll never forget listening to your Glitter and Be Glib for the first time.
Thank you.
Was just doing 2 versions of Kristen Chenoweth, which was incredible. But also,
thank you very much. There she is. I had to get her out there for a moment. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
I might get you to record all Musical Talks voiceovers in the future. But in a way, the LV, as she's called it in the play, it's kind of the role, apart from being set in the north of England, it's the role you were born to play, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, for a very long time, I have been aware of this beautiful play. I first knew the film version, and I will tell you that story because it's applicable. My upbringing, thankfully, is very different than LV's, who has sort of a very dramatic childhood, but very similar in that I grew up in a very musical home, and it was my father, like LV, who introduced me to many different genres of music and was always playing music in the house and encouraged me to listen to these great singers, particularly when he knew I loved to sing myself. So he wanted me to learn from them. And my father also knew that I was always a fan of British culture and particularly comedic television and a massive fan of the TV show Absolutely Fabulous. So even though I was very little when my father read about this new movie starring Jane Horrocks, who a lot of Americans would know from Ab Fab, and it was about this girl who did impressions of these great divas like Judy Garland and Shirley Bassey, my father was like, my daughter needs to see this. So I was too young to go to see the movie in the theater. It wasn't, the right thing to do. So I remember my father was so excited when it came out on video, and we all sat down and we watched this movie together. And it's so funny, but also so heartbreaking. And I loved it. I was blown away by the movie, even at a young age. But I was, of course, just over the moon, became obsessed with Jane Horrocks and her incredible impressions within that film. So then I found out it was a play. And my dad drove me into the city to the drama bookshop in New York City where we could get the script. and then I would read the script. And it was just over the years, of course, as I matured, I got more and more out of the story and the script. And I became hellbent on seeing it on stage. But the show is not done very frequently in America. And I don't know if that's because we do a lot of British plays, so it can't just be that it's a British show. But I think it was timing, you see. The British production that was originally done, it was like at the National Theatre, and then at the West, it went to the West End.
Sam Mendes, wasn't it?
Sam Mendes production. It won the Olivier Award for Best Comedy. I find it to be, it's so funny, I have to say, the movie is a lot darker than the play. The play has so much more humor and comedy in it. And so, although while I still think of the play as more of a dramedy than a comedy, it won the Olivier Award, and it was just this great big hit. And instead of bringing that production to Broadway, they tested a new production created by the wonderful Steppenwolf Theater Company. But unfortunately, that production was not received the same way, and it didn't have the same impact, and the show closed in 2 weeks. So timing-wise, it just was looked on like a flop in the U.S., which is so ridiculous, as it's been a massive hit for 30 years in the UK. Did
they change anything in that Steppenwolf production? They didn't make it American like they did for the Full Monty or something?
No, they didn't. They kept it the way it was. I don't know why. I didn't see it. I was too young. I don't know why it didn't work. But all I know is anyone after the film came out, people had no idea the Broadway show ever came and went, but people that saw the film, pretty much everybody that saw it loved it. So then if people would say to me, particularly as I was getting known for doing impressions, hey, have you seen this film, Little Voice? Or I hear it's a play. You should do that play. So like my whole life, I've loved it, or people have been telling me that I should do it. And it's very funny. Like I said, if only the Broadway show had come out after the movie, I think that it would have been received very differently. But that's neither here nor there. But I always loved the show, and this is a very long babble, so please stop me.
So did you find this production, or did this production find you? Was it just fortuitous, or?
This production sort of found me because for about 5-6 years, I have been almost doing this production. For various reasons, it didn't happen. I was actually attached to a production that was supposed to go to Broadway in New York, but we also know that didn't happen. So it's been a long time coming. And one of the reasons that I've been so attached to the show without a set production is because of the writer, Jim Cartwright. Jim Cartwright was aware of my work and met me and thought, gosh, you have to play LV. We have to make this happen. So he's been a huge champion of mine, which is such a compliment, particularly considering he wrote the show for Jane Horrocks. But so many phenomenal productions of Little Voice are done in the UK so frequently. The first time I saw it on stage, I saw the UK tour, the last tour that they did, that was actually directed by Jim Cartwright himself. Usually writers don't do that, and he's not really known for being a director, but he really wanted to do it. He wanted to see his vision of the show. And that's the one that I saw. And it was a gorgeous production, and it starred the incredibly talented impressionist Jess Robinson. And I just thought it was so fantastic. And I met Jim not long after that, and then he saw my show. It was at the Hippodrome. He's like, you have to do this show. You have to do Little Voice. But it had just been done. So I just, waiting sort of the appropriate amount of time for the UK to be ready to see the show again was one thing. And then I had conflicts. And then, of course, we were supposed to do this show in 2019, and then I got Funny Girl, and that was pushed to 2020. And then we all know what happened in 2020. So here I am now.
Yeah, I mean, we're desperate to see so many things, and I guess it is the comedy of the piece and the joyous. I mean, I hope I can go and see it somewhere, but it's
well, you have to now.
Yeah, because it is touring the country, and we'll talk about that as well. We are so desperate for entertainment right now, and it's almost like after the Depression happened in New York in the 20s, all these big musical comedies came back. After 9/11 happened, it was Hairspray, it was the producers, it was all these big musical comedies. And now,
and they're certainly taking those shows on the road right now. They are reviving so many shows, so many well-loved musicals. But Little Voices, I think, is a nice happy medium, and I think it's I don't know. To me, it's such a complete show. It's one of the reasons I love it, but I think it speaks for itself in that the show has had this life, this rich life for 30 years. It's almost a 30-year anniversary exactly, actually, of when it first opened. And I think it's because, I say this and it sounds cliche, but I think it's because it really has something for everybody. And even though it is a story of a northern family, a mother and daughter that are polar opposites and don't get along, have a very troubled relationship, it's has universal themes that reach everybody. There's a character in the show that everybody can relate to. There's a concept or a theme in the show that everybody can relate to. It's just, the show and the way Jim wrote it beautifully balances the as I say, the comedy and tragedy in everyday life. And a great theme in the show is feeling trapped. And how do you push yourself out of your comfort zone? You want something more. How do you push through a difficult time and sort of rise from the ashes? And that is what we're all doing right now. You know, we're all doing that. We're all being forced to start fresh. We all were trapped in our homes the way LV and her mother feel trapped in their homes for too long, where it's like a pressure cooker and it all keeps bubbling up until it just explodes. And out of that explosion comes some really good stuff and some really bad stuff. Yeah. Typically, and that's Little Voice.
I guess that's in the rehearsal room, talking about all the social situations that we've been in. It can really elevate a piece, can't it?
It can. It's very funny how we keep finding these similarities, and we go, you know what, I can relate to that because, and you tell your own story. And it's been a really interesting rehearsal process because we're all, obviously, as artists, so grateful to be in a room, creating and sharing and actually, you know, bouncing ideas off each other. But also this show, you know, the arts have survived this pandemic season, as I like to say. And I think although we know globally the arts are still underappreciated and artists are still underappreciated, arts lovers have shown how devoted they are and how much they need the arts and the catharsis it can bring and the joy and escapism that it can bring. And it's very, very important. And again, this show gives you all of it. You want slapstick comedy? Well, we get it. You want Shakespearean-esque monologues? We've got it. You want music, like you're going to a musical and songs you know and love? You've got that too.
Well, I guess the irony is the easy bits for you are probably the impressions. I want to hear how you slipped into the northern accents and that kind of rhythm of speaking.
You'll have to come to see that.
Okay.
So, no, you have to come because they all told me, they said, don't give away your accent. So I'm trying really hard not to do it. But no, and typically when you take on a role, you look at it and you go, okay, well, there's usually this X amount of dialogue to memorize and if you're singing this music and lyrics. Well, the music that I'm singing, I know because it's songs I know and love. And I would say 95 or 97% of the impressions I'm doing, I've done before. So yeah, tackling the impressions wasn't the difficult part.
But are you doing impressions as the character doing the impressions, or are you doing them as you doing the impressions?
That's a really interesting question. I'm doing them as LV, but LV does them very, very accurately, whereas Christina would maybe sometimes heighten something or exaggerate something and do something that I know my audience will laugh at, you know, or will get joy from, whereas LV has learned from watching videos and listening repeatedly, obsessively, until just through osmosis, she's developed these impressions. And so when she does them, it's a little more of an exact carbon copy than she's never performed them. Basically, the first time you, as an audience watching Little Voice, this play, the first time you see LV do a performance of this material, it is the first time she has ever done it. So a part of her is quite comfortable in that she's sung these voices and done all this in her room for years, but it's the first time she's doing it in front of an audience. And the funny thing is she sort of does not engage with the audience. She sort of turns off and goes into her own little world. So it's different in the way I would do them for sure, because I always go to connect with the audience. But LV is avoiding the audience as much as possible and just staying in her little dream world of divas.
And do you think, is there a sequence in the show where she's perfecting the impressions? So did you have to kind of put your Judy Garland aside and completely start from the ground up? As in, how would this character learn this voice? I'm kind of second guessing here, but I'm just curious what your...
No, it's an interesting question. I think it's just a matter of me stripping away the Christina performance style and going back to the basics of an impression and the purity of an impression. Like I said, this is not me going for a laugh or going for something extreme. This is me trying to be as accurate as possible, but also to the genre I'm singing. So for example, Judy Garland is one of the main impressions in the show. She's all throughout the show, clearly LV and LV's father's favorite. If you read the script, they're over it too much to ignore that fact. And the first thing that anybody in the show hears LV do is sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And I had to make a choice. I said, do I want to sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow as Judy, as an older Judy, like a Judy at Carnegie Hall, or Judy in the movie The Wizard of Oz? And she almost never sang it in the rest of her life the way she sang it in that movie, The Wizard of Oz. But because that's what most people know, and probably the first thing that LV would have heard, I choose to do it like Judy in the movie. A few scenes later, though, they hear Judy Garland sing. They hear LV singing as Judy Garland the song "The Man That Got Away." And for that one, because she sang it so much throughout her career, and to me, one of the greatest performances of it was on the Judy Garland Live at Carnegie Hall album, I choose to do that one as an older, more mature Carnegie Hall Judy Garland. So I'm thinking of that stuff, like which version of this song would speak to her? Which would she know better? She would know the movie The Wizard of Oz, so she would do that. But for Man That Got Away, on her dad's records, that's probably going to be a more mature Judy. So balancing it like that, that's how I'm doing it differently than Christina would.
Amazing. Could it work as a musical?
I don't think it could. Here's why. Because the beauty of this script is that Jim Cartwright writes the northern dialect, slang, way of speaking. He writes it in such a poetic way. And some of it does have built-in rhymes and rhythm. It's musical in itself. But to try to set it to music and to make it rhyme even further, I think takes away from the language that he is lifting from everyday life, that's real, it's true to him. Of course, it's heightened because he writes so beautifully. If we all spoke as beautifully as Jim wrote, we'd never turn on a television. I mean, it's just the most gorgeous text. But if I may, now I sound so artsy-fartsy now, but I just recently saw the Jamie Lloyd production of Cyrano. And that is amazing to watch because they're not rapping. It's not always rhyming, but it is in rhythm. And you feel like you're watching something musical and something that has ups and downs and ebbs and flows, like you're listening to an entire song, even though you're not. And that is how I believe Jim's text is. There's ba-ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba-ba. In the middle of a monologue, there's a beat like that. So yeah, I feel like it's got so much music already in it. To add more would conflict with what Jim has created.
And also, if you add songs around the diegetic musical moments, it would take it away from
it might
those
diminish
moments.
it.
Yeah,
exactly. Because I think the whole point of the story is that LV's life is noisy, not musical. Her mother is non-stop dialogue, and if there's quiet, she blasts the radio with rock music or things that make her anything to prevent her from a moment of quiet and a moment of true contemplation. She just is always looking to escape, and LV is always trying to drown that out. And so the only way she finds her own voice in this crazy world is to find it through other people. So at the end of the show, what your hope is that LV has found her own voice outside of and away from these divas, and that she's found her own voice underneath it all.
And do you feel that you yourself as an impressionist, do you ever wish people would listen to you for your own voice, I guess, is what I'm trying to... Yeah.
Well, people ask me this all the time, and I'm very happy to say, yes, I hope that people will let me do that, but I say they will continue to let me do that, because I don't feel like I have only been forced to do impressions. Maybe that's because, people might know me from YouTube or their screens and TV shows and whatnot, the TV appearances in which I do impressions. But I'm a live performer, and all of the videos that I had that went viral were me live on stage performing. It wasn't filmed for the screen, And so those shows that I do, those concerts that I do, whether it's 2 songs at a not open mic night, but like a little variety show, or my own concerts that people are choosing to, click a button, buy a ticket, and then get off their booties and come see me live in person. All of those shows are about 50-50, half my own voice, half impressions. It's the way I like to balance my shows. It's not just for my ego, but I always say the audience can better appreciate the impressions when they know more of what my voice sounds like. And if you're telling a good story, you need a bit of both. So if you're trying to craft a well-rounded show, you want a bit of both. And so I've never felt that people have been like, no, stop singing as you, do the voices. In fact, I would tell you a majority of people say the opposite. They say, oh, I love the impressions, but I'd love to hear more as you, or you don't have to do them. And that's the greatest compliment I could get. I mean, I love doing the impressions. I wouldn't do them if I didn't. And I also respect the fact that it's opened many doors for me and people do come wanting to see impressions. But I make sure that I'm in there. And, I briefly mentioned earlier that I can't even say last year. My gosh, it was like 2 years ago, but it feels like last year. The last big job I had before the world stopped was playing Fanny Bryce in this big production of Funny Girl in Paris, directed and choreographed by the great Stephen Mear. And when Stephen Mear and Jean-Luc Chaplin of the Theatre Marigny and Broadway and West End acclaim, when they hire you to play one of the greatest roles in all of musical theater as a singer and actress without an impression, even though the role was played by Barbra Streisand, who I can impersonate, I clearly did not when I played it myself. That was also an incredible moment for me because I was very tired at that point of touring on my own, doing my own concerts, and I was really ready. I desperately wanted to do another musical. And I was sort of telling my agent, like, just submit me for this, this, and this. And he's like, well, that might not be, right for you. And I was like, oh, I'm just so desperate. And he said, don't worry, the right thing will come along. And when I saw that this auditions for Funny Girl were coming out, I said, I've got to be seen. But, people don't typically see me as the Fanny Bryce type. I don't know. Hopefully I'll get the audition. And I never thought I'd get the part, and I never thought it would go so well. The show would be extended and be a hit, but more than anything, it proved to myself, as well as others in the industry that needed to see it, that I am also Christina, the singer and actor that doesn't just do voices. So hopefully Little Voice is a great balance of that, because I get to show off my acting chops and do impressions. And Sorry for the babble.
It's interesting. You may have noticed there's a production of Back to the Future playing in London.
Yeah.
And some of the impressions are the Crispin Glover impression that is terrifyingly amazing. And
I lost my mind. It was so good.
And Ollie Dobson, who plays Marty McFly, might as well be a young Michael J. Fox on stage.
Yeah.
But oh my God, I can't remember his name, very embarrassingly. The Doc Brown actor.
But Roger Bart does not do it at all.
Roger Bart is doing on his own planet, and
it works.
Yeah, because you have to break away and give something different.
Exactly. I think if they were going to do a carbon copy of everything, it would have been like, why are we doing this? But to pick just a few people and a few bits to put in that really honor that original film and make people feel nostalgic like that is brilliant. Because it's done with full respect. They're not doing it over the top. They're not doing it to lampoon. They're doing it celebrating those voices and those impressions. And that's what I always try to do. And that's why Little Voice is so loved, because she's doing it all. From her heart. And
you haven't gone back and watched the film since, I'm guessing.
I went back and watched Little Voice. Definitely. I'm trying to think when I was doing it. So it was 2020. We closed Funny Girl March 7th. I flew back March 9th. And by March 12th, everything had closed down. And then I knew Little Voice was going to be pushed. Knowing it was going to have to be delayed.
The rise and fall and push of Little Voice.
Yeah, right. So I'm thinking I probably watched it toward the end of 2020, and then haven't seen it since. So, again, the play is very different than the movie when it comes to a lot of the levity and the pacing and so you also try to make it your own. Like I definitely think of Jane Horrocks, but I am nothing like her physically or, kind of the way that I am. So you just have to say, okay, like I did with Barbra Streisand in the Funny Girl film, you have to sort of forget it exists. It's very difficult to erase, but it's the only way to make your own successful portrayal of something that's iconic is you have to do your own thing.
So what has Christina learnt doing this show when it will come to move forward doing your own impressions? Has doing this show taught you anything new about the people you impersonate, or any new vocal intonations or anything like that?
Ooh, that's a tough question.
How's that for a question?
I know. Thanks there, Nick. But well, you know, some impressions are more difficult than others, and 2 or 3 of the new ones in here are very different for me. And there's also one an impression that I'm doing that I typically I've done before, but I kind of get off of it very quickly because I've always went, I don't think I do it very well. Well, now is the time to try to make it better and say, well, why don't you think you do it very well? What can you push? So I have changed my approach in how I do some of them. And I'm going back to what I said earlier about going back to sort of the core of how to do an impression. I've been immersing myself in their music and trying once again to master the way they sing their own signature songs. A lot of what I do in my concerts is, okay, well, yeah, you can hear Celine Dion sing a Celine Dion song, but what about her singing ABBA? You know, so, but this is getting back to the core of the impressions here, which is enough. You know, audiences are entertained by that. I don't have to have them also do the alphabet and cartwheels and whatever, you know. So it was nice. It's been nice to get back to what I call like the centered impression, like the grounded, just do it right. You have to learn to do it right before you do it wrong or before you play with it. So it's been helpful to me. Yeah, it's been helpful for me to go back to that. And it gave me a new appreciation for some, let me tell you. As an actor, what I'm liking is just that, as you can tell, I talk a lot. I'm a pretty outgoing person, but I definitely have parts of me, you would never really believe it, that are quite introverted. I get very embarrassed when other people are like, just get up there and do it. I'm like, absolutely not. It's not the time or place. Give me a stage, give me a microphone, and I know what's supposed to be done up there. But if we're somewhere where that's not the norm, you will not hear me, you know, raise my voice, let alone get up and sing a song. I'm not that person. So I've been tapping into that side of me, that more quiet, a little bit scared, you know.
It's like the Once Upon a Mattress, I'm shy, or whatever the song is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you are such a talent, and at the moment, I can't think of anyone better to do this role.
Oh, thank you.
What are the impressions you're doing in this, and which ones were new for you?
I can't give them all away. The only new one I'll tell you, because I've said it before, so I'm allowed. They want me to keep some surprises so that when you come see the show. I am doing, like I said, Judy Garland and Edith Piaf and Marilyn Monroe and Shirley Bassey. Those are impressions you know Little Voice is going to do, and they're in the trailers, so there you go. So you'll see me do those for sure. But a new one that is mentioned in the script, but I've never done before, is Scylla.
I was going to say, is Cilla Black or Dusty in this or anything like that?
And yeah, they threw Dusty in some of the other revivals of the show, but they didn't throw Scylla in. And that's something I noticed. And I thought, you know, I think Scylla, she's a very difficult impression because she doesn't have too many isms to pull. If she had something really broad about her, everybody
laughs.
could hook into.
No,
yeah, but she's not laughing when she's singing. I mean, that's the hard thing. I can't do that bit. We didn't write in a bit of her doing her TV show or whatever. We're being really truthful to what the script is. And so Scylla for me is difficult because I have to do a very specific version of Scylla, and her songs that he would be listening to on those albums are quote unquote younger Scylla, again, with even fewer of her isms and bits. So that is the big difficult one for me right now that I'm still working on. She also doesn't move around a lot when she sings. So it's like, I can't even do a lot of physicality.
Doesn't move around much anymore. But did you did you see the Sheridan Smith thing about Cilla Black?
Yeah, so I watched it when it first aired, but I've tried not to go back and watch it again because I don't want to do Sheridan doing Scylla. But yeah, I always say if they gave me a wig, people would probably think I sounded a lot more like her. I always say that. And that's not an insult to Sheridan or anything. It's just the way it is. You put on a costume and everyone's like, that was great. You stand there looking as yourself and they're like, I don't know about that. Well, so I have to work even harder, and then it's just me as LV, but just me up there. So it's very tricky.
So it's interesting that they can tailor the acts depending on the show location, I guess.
Yeah, so Jim Cartwright has in the original script the original bits of music, I should say, for Elvie's big performance scene. Let me be specific there. For Elvie's performance scene, he lists the songs, I believe, that Jane Horrocks did in the original production. But at the end of every script, he has a few notes. And they always say, feel free to tailor the medley to the actress playing LV, keeping in mind the time period and what's appropriate for the show. So, yeah, I mean, they're not going to force me to do a voice that I absolutely can't do, because then it would defeat the purpose of the piece. She's supposed to be good at all of these. And we're also not going to throw in Celine Dion, because that would be inappropriate. Right. So you have to find a balance. So there are a few impressions that do fit the time period that LV's father could have had an album of in this genre of divas that fits the time frame. To put in a few other impressions that suit me personally, without pushing it too far that you're like, why is that in there? You don't want to shoehorn any, anybody in there shouldn't be.
Do you, I'm not sure the time frame of the show, have you started? Are you in rehearsals? What's happening at the moment?
Yes, we're in rehearsals. It's my day off, and it's been wonderful. I mean, the cast, we all get along really well, which is not always the case. So we're super thrilled because it's a very small company and we're touring. So yeah, better get along. And we have a wonderful, wonderful, I say like leader. I don't know that she'd even want me to call her that, but in Shobna Gulati, because she is such a wonderful actress and so varied, and talk about somebody who can balance the light and the dark, the comedy and the tragedy. She's just so good about that. And Mari is one of the greatest roles for any actress. And then it's delicious in its dialogue and the charisma of the role, but she's not a likable character. So you've got to find somebody who is likable in nature and who you want to root for, but then you're like, why are you doing these things? And you can't be afraid, as the actress playing it, to be disliked a little bit by the audience. And Shobna balances that while being the nicest human. Came in and cooked lunch for us the other day. I mean, she's just...
Back to her dinner lady's roots.
Yeah, she's just so absolutely wonderful. And Ian Kelsey is so joyous and so great, and him and Shobna have worked together before, so they have a good rapport. So yeah, it's a very happy rehearsal room, and I feel very grateful to be working with them because they're so talented. So they make me better, and also because they are Northerners and I can get accent notes from them, so it's very good as well.
So how will you feel doing this performance in the North? Will you feel more self-conscious than usual, or...
Of course I will. Everybody always says, oh, it must be so easy for you to do impressions and all that and do accents because you do it all the time. It's like, it never gets easy. If you want me to do an impression for the actual celebrity I'm impersonating, forget it. I mean, I would be scared out of my mind. And you want me to do a Northern accent for people in the North? I'm going to be absolutely terrified. But hopefully after the first few performances and getting it under my belt and getting more comfortable with it, I'll be able to roll with the punches and it'll be smooth sailing.
And when is the first and last performance?
The first performance is March 23rd in Southampton at the Mass Mayflower. And the last performance is I'm going to get the date wrong, but it's like the second to last week in July.
Okay. So it's a nice little kind of, it's not an overly long run, so you will enjoy the breadth and width of England. But I
will enjoy seeing more of England than I've seen before.
I was going to say, you've been here rather a lot, though, because we are friends on Facebook, so I do kind of spy on what you're doing sometimes. And
I've been here on and off for 8 years, which is one of the reasons I just officially moved here with my husband and my dog. Yeah.
Lovely. And how convenient for you as well to do the show. And what are the future... what would they like to do with it in the future? Obviously it's too early to tell, but
it is too early to tell. I will tell you that at one point the tour had, before the pandemic and all that stuff, the tour had been a little bit longer and there was more cities And so I don't know if they're planning on extending the tour. Everybody, of course, who wouldn't want to have a transfer into town in one way or another. I know that the cast and the producers would love for that to happen. But of course, we really can't do anything or plan anything until it opens and we see how it's received. So we're taking it one step at a time. If the past few years have taught us anything, it's just take it one step at a time.
Yeah. Well,
and be grateful for what you have at the moment. And that's what we're just really grateful to be in a position to open this show and bring it to audiences that are so willing and excited to see it.
If you're coming to Bromley or Wimbledon or Richmond, I will be hopefully able to go and see it.
I'll see you in Richmond.
Oh, how wonderful. That's
Yes.
Next tube stop along for me. So, Christina Bianco, thank you so much for talking about The Rise and Fall of Little Voice. We do urge our listeners to grab some tickets to go and see it. I wish you all the best of luck with the production. I'm sure it'll be absolutely incredible. They're in very safe hands, and larynxes, I guess, is that the right term? We'll have you on again soon to discuss whatever your career takes you next, Christina.
Yes, I look forward to bringing you more fun in the future. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Musical Talk. To find out more about the world of Musical Talk, you can visit our website at musicaltalk.co.uk, where you'll find all our episodes, or you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Please follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Musical Talk.